Hi, everyone. So, this is the second of our Purposeful Leaders series. And I have an amazing guest today, Richard Leider, whom I had the chance to meet like 6 years ago, now that I'm counting backwards. And it was a great project that actually AARP started. And it was called Life Reimagined. It no longer exists, unfortunately, but it was really about bringing more purpose to people's lives, especially after 50. So we know that the curve has changed. People are not thinking about retirement at their 50. So it was an amazing project, and I got to meet amazing people like Richard, and I have him with me today, and we're obviously going to talk about purpose. And before I hand it to you, Richard, to tell a little bit about like how you started this purpose work, I want people to know that Richard is the only person that I know who has spent really all his life and decades to purpose. So I respect him, admire his work, and would love to hear more about him today. So, Richard, can you just start with like, I'm always intrigued to find out what triggered you to get into the purpose work? Where did it all start for you, so that our like people who are watching and listening to us know a little bit about like your work?
Thanks. I am privileged to be with you today. It's been too long, but
Yes.
now we're back together again. So thank you for inviting me. Two things to answer your question directly. Number one was my background's in counseling psychology. And when I got out of graduate school, trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life, I saw that one of the people that I had esteemed and had studied was actually doing a webinar, not a webinar, that's today, a seminar in San Diego, and his name is Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And many people may not know, and I'll say in a nutshell, Man's Search for Meaning is one of the most influential books in American history and in world history in terms of what to do with your life, the type of thing. And he was in 3 Nazi concentration camps. His whole family was exterminated. He was liberated, and he weighed 87 pounds, went back to Vienna, where he's a neurologist and a psychiatrist, healed, and wrote Man's Search for Meaning in 9 days. And that was a huge wake-up call for me to spend a week with him in San Diego as a young person right out of graduate school. And we've all had, and your listeners have had, fortuitous encounters with people that have changed their lives. This is a life changer. And so who are your life changers? Well, for me, he said, the last of the human freedoms is choice, to choose what you want your life to be about, regardless of the adversity. And obviously, concentration camp is one I couldn't even fathom. So that was one thing, the fortuitous encounters. And he was one of several, and I won't go into the details on others. But the second thing was that I had to find something to do, and I ended up being one of the top HR officers at what is now U.S. Bank. It used to be called First Bank. But I had something, Brooke, called a side hustle. Now, I didn't know what it was at the time, but a side hustle was called Lunch Hour Limited. You buy me lunch, I coach you. Do what I love to do, which is coaching and listening and doing that. Although I was an HR professional. And so my boss, the CEO, didn't think this was a really great idea. And the reason why was that I had an 80% success ratio. The people I coached, lunch hour limited. You buy me lunch, we got an hour, and we coach. I had an 80% success ratio because 80% of the people I coached quit.
Yeah.
But they actually didn't quit.
Uh-huh.
As today, with the pandemic, a lot of people are looking at what's next. These are people who said, look, I'm doing fine, but, I'm not really as engaged and as fulfilled. And what can I do? And so when I say they quit, a very small percentage actually left. And they should have probably left anyway. But the others went back to their supervisor and had a conversation back then that was unusual about how they could bring their gifts and passions and values to work, or maybe they wanted to go to a different part of the organization. So the point is, those are two things that kind of launched me into then eventually leaving the bank in the HR world. It used to be called personnel, by the way, and launching into my own thing. And I've become a pioneer in the purpose movement ever since.
Yeah, thank you. That's amazing story. And I remember listening that from you, but to meet Viktor Frankl is like, oh my God, that is a huge, big, of course, in like an impact on anybody, I think.
Of
And he is
course, yeah,
right. I mean, anybody who knows him and his life, and I think a lot of people do, and
yeah,
read his books and everything, it's impossible almost not to be impacted by his life.
exactly.
And the human spirit is like a great example of that. So, and
Yeah,
that's amazing. And like I know, like that's why I feel like you are definitely one of the pioneers in this work.
no,
So like I know we're gonna go back and forth, but like
sure.
especially around now, and I know you're following what's happening with the pandemic. It seems like from all the research and studies that I listen to and read, feels like there is some awakening that you and I and many people who are in the purpose work were really willing to see in this lifetime is kind
Yeah.
of, I think, happening. People are reflecting, doing life audits. We hear this word called big resignation. People are leaving their jobs, maybe not even finding the right one yet, but really questioning the meaning of their lives. What do you say to that about the pandemic and what's happened to people?
Well, that's true. I think the perfect storm is the pandemic
Mhm.
really held up the mirror in a lot of ways. Secondly, the demographics of aging in the population. But third, it's the end of work as we know it. And it's the end of retirement as we know it. And it's the end of a lot of things as we knew it. And I know I just did an interview and with something called, I'd never heard of before, called the Real Estate Cafe in Boston. And they do scientific research on tracking people. And they said 46% of the people who worked at home want to move
Mhm.
physically. They don't want to live where they're living. If they can do what they do, then they're going to do it someplace where they, and one of my friends and colleagues who you know and met uh, uh, is the mayor, who I'm talking about, Alan Weber.
And yes,
Yeah,
yes.
we co-wrote the book Life Reimagined around the experience that you had with Life Reimagined.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And he became eventually, long story, but the mayor of Santa Fe, New Mexico. He's running for his second term now. He said, you can't find a place here. They're pouring in here because people want to live in places like this. Santa Fe is not everybody's choice, but it's a choice. So I think what's happening is that people are starting to own what they felt underneath before and bringing it courageously forward, whether it's with their boss or their organization or their own, where they live.
Yeah, that's very true. And I have seen like, and I think most of us are aware that when something tragic happens in people's lives, you start to question a lot of things, right? And this is happening to
Absolutely.
the whole world. And now everybody's trying to, some of them, maybe not everyone, but a big percentage of people are awakening to their soul almost and what their
Yeah.
inner world has been telling them, but they were probably ignoring, denying, maybe not having the time. So like, what would you even like maybe give as a recommendation for people who are maybe not still not there, but not wait for something horrible to happen, but just to be awakened to what's inside of them, what their
Yeah.
purpose is? Like, what is your best recommendation for people like that?
Well, first of all, I agree with your assessment, because sometimes we're pushed by pain and
Yes.
sometimes we're pulled by possibility in terms of making these kinds of choices or these reflections. But there is no way forward without doing some inner work.
Yes.
It just isn't.
Yes.
The answer is not out there. And one of my colleagues on his answering machine, when you call, says his voicemail says, at the sound of the tone, please leave your answer to life's two eternal questions. Who are you and what do you want?
Oh my God, that's wonderful.
So who are you and what do you want changes and
Yes.
can. And one of the things that you and I know agree with is that purpose is age agnostic. Age agnostic meaning it can come earlier in life, it can come later in life, it can come in midlife. It's not something that's just for the wealthy or the educated or the age at a certain age. It comes in a variety of ways. And so one of the things that let's just make this really simple, because I talk these days about purpose with a big P and purpose with a little p. The big P purpose is, that's too big, and I'll get to that. Purpose of the little p is what Frankl was really talking about. When you wake up tomorrow morning in a concentration camp, you can give somebody else a kind word, a crust of bread, a slurp of soup, a hug, hope for the future. Well, you can do that now. There are 1,440 little p moments in a day. And you can change your mindset today. So let's just give your listeners here the answer to the big question. So what is purpose? The universal answer to what is purpose is, it is the only two words: grow and give. If you get up tomorrow morning and figure out, how am I going to grow and give today? And at the end of the day, ask yourself, how did I grow and give today? You'll be on the purpose path, and you'll know within a week what this purpose thing really feels like. It's kind of like a felt sense. It's not just a concept. It's a felt sense. It feels good to make a small difference. Like Frankl pointed out, in life, you can do that regardless of your age or your circumstance. And so the small p, when I talk about that with like a live audience, there will be a live audience, meaning I'm there with them. Not that they're alive, but we're in person. There's a sigh. It's people go, I knew I had this, but I didn't really. I always thought I had to have a cause. I had to save the world, or I had to do something big. And as leaders, I had to have an organization. No, that's not true. A purposeful leader is somebody who brings that small p to work every single day and brings that small p out in their employees every single day. And that's not magic. That's easy.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I think you just made a great point, because I also see from my work that people get overwhelmed when they hear the purpose. Maybe they hear the big P and they feel like, oh, I don't know how to do that. It's just so overwhelming. Where do I start? But that's why the tips that you gave with the grow and give is so useful, because like you said, anybody can do it at any age. And I think age is also a limiting belief in many people. They feel like, oh, I wasted maybe my life. I don't want to find out I wasted because it wasn't aligned with my purpose. And that's not true either. So, yeah, that's great advice.
So, I mean, there's three things that keep people back from embracing purpose. There's many, but three obvious ones. One is the big P. I have to have a cause. No, you have to have a mindset. And secondly is it hasn't been revealed to me. You don't have to have it revealed. One of the big insights that took me years to figure out, you, I think, figured it out earlier, is that practice brings clarity. If you're waiting for clarity and then you'll practice, if you get up every day and try this, take grow and give and put it on a Post-it and put it on your mirror. And in the morning, ask yourself how you're going to grow and give today. And at the end of the day, that's a practice, a simple practice. But clarity comes from practice. It comes from action.
Yes.
And so that's the second thing that holds people back. They're waiting for God to whisper in their ear or for a revelation to happen. Well, that can happen. That happens to people. And fortuitous encounters like meeting Frankl, those can be game changers. But the third thing that really is important to you and important to me is this: purpose is not a luxury. I'm going to say that again. Purpose is not a luxury. It is fundamental to health, to healing, to happiness, and to leadership, and ultimately even to longevity. People tend to live longer. So it used to, can science explain purpose? Today, yes. Earlier, not so much, but now it can. And so for those kind of naysayers about it, it's like, well, if you want evidence, it's there. And the last chapter in the book, The Power of Purpose, Can Science Explain Purpose, was just, a simple entree into that conversation. But the science is very surprising. Even, I taught with Elizabeth Blackburn, who won the Nobel Prize
Mhm.
Nobel Prize for what she calls the telomere effect.
Mhm.
And the telomeres are those little things on every chromosome in every person's body. And if those telomere, those little like shoelaces at the end of a chromosome, if those things shrink, you age poorly and are at risk for health issues. If those things stay steady or grow, you actually live longer and healthier. And what she found in the telomere effect, which she wrote about and won the Nobel Prize for, is that purpose is central to telomere growth. Well, I mean, what else do you need? I mean,
Yeah.
you need a reason to get up in the morning. You need
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. That it is amazing. And thank you. So many things, so many gems in there. And just one thing that I was even going to ask you, and you already answered, is like a lot of people see it like it's luxury to people who have everything. And now they
right,
can sit down and have time to think about their purpose. And
right,
that's why I'm so glad you said that. And the second one is like, I have a great example who is my dad. He's 92 now, and every day he has a purpose to wake up to, and that keeps him alive. And I see
yeah,
that. And I
yeah,
see the people around him who might have even already died, of course, for different reasons, but the people who are at home in their corner doing nothing, and compare him to my dad
right,
is a whole different story. And I don't only see it in him, he's my closest example, of course, but I see
sure,
a lot of people who found their purpose. They don't want to retire, first of all. And I think that's
right.
a great topic that you were involved in some company that my husband also works with. So just maybe we can touch a little bit about that too. Then I want to go back to the organizational side of things, but this might be a bridge to that conversation. So can you tell us a little bit about, like, you already said it makes us healthy and with the longevity, but
Right.
what do you recommend people who are really willing to retire? And I have so many of them in my life, in their early 40s, 50s even, and maybe they don't even have a plan for the rest of their lives, and it could be another 50 years. What do you say about the retirement and purpose?
Well, isolation is fatal, as we know. Going it alone is not a good idea. So one of the things is to have what I call a sounding board, or people that you can talk about. Everybody's an experiment of one. So there's no easy answer that just fits everybody. But one piece that we know, because one of the other big breakthroughs for me early in life, early in my trajectory here of purpose, was getting a fellowship and being part of what is called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. It's the longest standing study of adults anywhere.
Yes.
And one of the key things that they talk about is that healthy people who live longer, happier, fulfilling lives have purpose and relationships. So when you get down to the two big ones, it's, purpose and what do you want? Well, the answer to that answering machine question, what do you want? Who are you? What do you want? Well, there's two things that people answer, and over time and at the end of their lives. One of them is that, number one, they want to belong.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
want to be part of, we'll call it tribe, or it's beyond family, though. It's community. It could be a faith organization. It could be a company. But they want to feel like they fit. And secondly, they want to matter.
Mm-hmm.
Flat out, full stop. People want their lives to matter, and they don't have to have it on the wall as a big legacy or, but if you go, I know I'm asked a lot to do memorial services for people. And because, I'm a speaker and I can talk about aging and things like this, but, David Brooks wrote about eulogy virtues versus resume virtues.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we spend our lives on our resume virtues, building our resume and building our success and the numbers, et cetera. But if you go to a memorial service, the eulogy virtues are, who is this? And why did they matter in my life? And then you feel the emotion and the stories and things. So we need both. It's not either or. So number one is to belong. And isolation is fatal, and a sounding board can help you to look at that. Sounding board is somebody who, there's several people. There's a committed listener on your sounding board.
Mm-hmm.
So I would ask your listeners, who is their committed listener? Who gets them? Not just that they can talk, but really gets them at a soul level. And secondly, who's their wise elder? Who's the person who's a bit older than them that helps them see the big picture, and not just today's pain or today's realities. And third, who's a wise younger? Who are people in your life that ask you questions that, oh, geez, I never thought of that before. Not just about technology and things like that, but about, life. And fourth, who is your purpose partner? Who's the person you can go it with who holds you accountable? You said you're going to do the Post-it, grow and give every morning for 5 days. They check in with you every day or at the end of 5 days and say, how'd you do? I want you to be successful on your terms, not on my terms. So they practice, care versus cure. So there's a lot of ways to go with all of this. And but I think the key thing is that everybody's an experiment of one. You got to decide what you want. And secondly, isolation is fatal. Don't go it alone.
Yeah. Thank you. That's great advice. Thank you. Yeah, we did something with my husband just recently based on what you and Jackson Company have started, actually, and the nice videos and the intern movie and your talks. It was amazing for people that are like thinking of retirement, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just like to know what you're going to do with it, and it's not going to take all your time to golf every day or travel every day. It's good to have some purpose and plan in that next stage of your life. Was a great message there too.
In my new book, there's a chapter that the media really loves. It's called "How Do I Stop Living a Default Life?"
Mm-hmm.
And a default life is one that you just kind of bought into. Here's the way it goes, and then I retire, and then and the fact is that default life has changed. We've added 3 decades to life for many people, most, and so the question is then, how do I start living the good life? My vision of the good life. And so retirement as we knew it is pretty much over. We've retired retirement. Not for everybody, as you say. For some people, that'll be fine. But for others, if they're retiring, they're doing it differently. And if they're doing it different, and part of doing it differently is many, as the AARP research points out, are working and want to work or some have to work economically. That's not what we want, but some want to work because they want to be connected. And they want to be relevant. The key word is relevance. How do I stay relevant my whole life?
No, that's a great point. And I love the word retirement. And I have worked with some retirees in a nonprofit organization. They were trying to mentor people who are owning new businesses, small businesses. And I was asking them, there were so many people over their 70s, 80s. And I said, how come you're not at home and enjoying your retirement? They said, it's not so enjoyable after some point. We want to contribute. We want to help other people. That gives so much more joy, was the answer I got from them years ago, which made me start thinking that, like you said, then they feel relevant and they don't want to feel like they're useless staying at home, right?
The most unhappy, there's a lot of research that you can look at, but there's a book out called The U-Curve of Happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And the U-Curve of Happiness, I endorse the book and my story is in the book, et cetera. So I have to acknowledge, that. But the U-Curve of Happiness points out worldwide, major research, that the most unhappy period of life is midlife.
Mm-hmm.
It's you could say it's in the 40s or early 50s, but it's not exactly, when is midlife? It's hard to. But the point is, we have the most pressures, and the happiest times are often the next phase of life into the 70s and 80s, and earlier in life when we're making the big moves from adolescence. Mm-hmm. So there's 2 big shifts we make. One is from adolescence to adulthood, but the next big shift that we have, and that's what I'm studying these days, is from adulthood to elderhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's interesting. And I don't think people expect that a lot unless they like look at these research and read this stuff and know it as much as you do. So thank you for pointing that out too. Yeah.
You remember the book Passages?
Yes. Uh-huh.
That came out 47 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was on the New York Times bestseller list for years because it added a new language and a new narrative to midlife,
Yeah.
which most everything was about earlier in life. Well,
Yeah.
now the people like me and you and others are looking at the new narrative for the next phase of life. And
True.
money is part of that. Medicine or health is part of that. And meaning is part of that. I call it the 3 M's: money, medicine, and meaning. They're all fundamental. You know, people who have enough money and
Yeah.
enough, not medicine as in pills, but health,
Mhm.
but aren't happy. And even though, they've got that. And other people who don't have enough money or enough health and are fulfilled. Well, so meaning is fundamental, is one of those M's.
Yeah, that's so true. Thank you. And I know like you have so much work and that you have done with individuals and finding their purpose in every age group. But tell us a little bit about what do you look when you see organizations now really starting to feel the importance and the crucial part that purpose can play at work for people so that they find meaning in what they do and don't do useless, meaningless stuff all day long. Like, what has your experience been working with organizations like that and looking at purposeful leaders? What have you seen and what differences do you see today versus 10 years ago?
Yeah. Well, that's a really big and a broad question. And
I know.
first of all, I would say that people today want to trust their leader. And to trust your leader, you've got to know who that is. So, when I did some research a while back on watching leaders talk to orientation groups, and they failed miserably time and time again, talking about high end this and their resume. And so what we discovered, what do people want? They want the answer to 3 questions. What do you stand for? What won't you stand for? And who do you stand with?
Mm-hmm.
And so the question is, you have to be transparent as a leader to say, well, what is it you stand for? What is your purpose? What are your values? What are your aspirations? They want to know who you are. And otherwise, they'll phone it in, they'll do their job, but they're not going to give you the discretionary energy and innovation that you really want. And so you need to answer those kinds of questions. And, I used to teach all the time with the late Stephen Covey, who wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But many people may not know that he came out with a book just before he died called The 8th Habit. And he said that was the most important book he wrote because and what is the 8th habit? The 8th habit is discerning your gifts and helping others do the same. Your strengths, if you were, your talents, and helping others do the same. Great leaders today help people become successful to bring who they are to work. Mm-hmm. And so, every job has latrine work. Every job has stuff we don't want to do. But if we can use our gifts on things we really feel passionate about in environments that value us, that value our voice, there's a fighting chance here that you're going to wake up every day with and go to work and see it more as a calling as opposed to a job. Yeah. And I think that's what people today want. They want to, I talk about not finding purpose because it's not out there. It's unlocking purpose. Purpose is in there in our gifts, in our passions, and in our values. And we need to bring it out and get clear about it and then work in places, if we can, that help us to align who we are with what we do. And that's not it's as Covey said, that's the name of the game in leadership today.
Yeah, so true. Thank you. And it feels like we are taking better steps than we used to. And some leaders are recognizing that, like you said, they have to be who they are, not in resume way, but like in eulogy, you were saying, like virtues, right? Show those virtues and share that with your people and create the environment so that they can share that with others as well. So it's not only professional self that you bring to work, but your whole self work, right? Yeah.
Now, one of my colleagues, who's a national public radio economics correspondent, Chris Farrell, and wrote a book called Purpose and a Paycheck. We want both. It's not, we're not, this isn't kumbaya. This isn't like, oh, this is, I need to make a living. I need to pay the bills, and you'll do better.
Yeah.
And probably get paid more if you actually can figure out this formula.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like you said, when you are using your purpose at work, like there's a discretionary extra energy that you didn't even know that exists. So of course you work better and harder and more engaged and more fulfilled. So So do you feel like before
the late Barbara Marx Hubbard, who is a futurist, et cetera, and died in her 90s, talked about and wrote about something which I found intriguing called vocational arousal. Vocational arousal. And it's like, what arouses you to want to really get up and go do this? What arouses you to want to serve in certain ways? And when you have that arousal, which is not a sexual thing, it's a vocational thing, there's what she's talking about, there's emotion.
Yes.
There's emotional engagement, not just in your head, but with your heart. And that's not something that in the past, in the industrial era, we expected or even knew was possible, and we didn't. But now people want to live places and work in places that really, I'll say arouse, but that's maybe too strong a word, but it's kind of a memorable word.
Yeah.
And
yeah. So like since you've been in this work for decades, how do you feel about the future with all the conversations we are having with purpose and it's getting more attention? And then I'm going to talk about your books as the last thing we can do. But do you feel hopeful for the next generations, and knowing the next generations are already more in tune with themselves and looking for more purpose at work already in their younger years?
I know it's fashionable to say I'm optimistic, but I am. I'm optimistic when I look at my own 17 and 19-year-old grandkids and what they care about, what they're doing. They've got a trial and error and figure it out themselves. It's not like they've got the solution, but they're not just signing on to a default life. They're trying to figure it out, and it's not because I had much to do with it, quite frankly, although I've had some. But so I don't know what to say about it, other than I think things like a pandemic really bring up truth-telling and transparency in ways that that mortality does when you age. It sort of brings up a certain sense like I better get on with it.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm not sure what to make. There's so many complexities today. It's like I have to take a news fast because it's just too overwhelming with everything. But I think compassion is the soul of purpose.
Yeah.
And I feel that the younger generation has a sense of compassion about the planet, about people, and not everybody, but there's more of it than less of it.
Yeah. Thank you. And I see that around me too. So it's good to hear that from you too.
Do you see it too? Yeah.
Yeah, a lot. There's so much more consciousness. There's so much more deep thinking, and they do care about the planet. And they're all, as a consumer, even all their actions are influenced by that too. So that gives me hope too. And of course, to be around people like you who have been pioneers in this work and following the research, like you said, and the science field that is proving that this works, I think, and that we have more conversations around it is great. And I know you're going to have a lot of other great conversations in a lot of different platforms. And thank you for being with us too. But I have just a couple of your books with me. I know The Life Reimagined is another one, but The Power of Purpose is a great book, of course. And then Work Reimagined. Then there was Life Reimagined. And I know there is another one that you just wrote recently. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Richard?
It just came out and is already in reprint on July 13th. And it's the result of 2 years. David Shapiro and I, it's our 6th book together. He's a philosopher, a tenured philosophy professor, and I come from the psychological, spiritual angle. And it's called, the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, we flip that and we say, who do you want to be when you grow old? Now that you're grown up, so to speak. And the subtitle is The Path of Purposeful Aging.
Wow.
And what we've learned and put in is it's a very nice little hardcover 5x7, 200-page book with great stories in it from many walks of life. And it's, as I said, it's already in reprint. It came out in print, audio, Kindle, and simple Chinese all on the same day, July 13th.
Wow.
And the uptake has been that, with whatever's going on in the world that we've talked about, it's really been an amazing journey. I have 50 media requests on my calendar right now. And it used to be something about purpose or purposeful aging or that kind of thing would be on the back of the variety section near the obituaries. Now, I'm getting calls from, just today, from PBS, the National Public Radio, from Wall Street Journal, from New York Times, because things have changed, the game has changed and people are stepping up and grabbing. And, I don't know how many people want to continue doing what they're doing, but organizations and leaders, faith-based organizations, community, they're all looking at it in a new way. How do we remain relevant to people who are stepping up to take charge of their lives?
Yeah, no, that's amazing. First of all, congratulations. I don't know which the number of books you have. You have so many.
11.
11. Okay, wow. And thanks for sharing all that wisdom by writing your books, by speaking everywhere and putting it out there. And I'm so glad, it gives me so much hope that they're after you and they want to hear from you. And I'm glad that my listeners will be able to get so many of those wonderful things that you shared with us. And I can talk to you for definitely hours and days to come, but I'll try to cut it short. And where can they find out more about you? Can you also give us your website, Richard?
Yeah, it's Richard Leider, Leid, as in David, ER.com.
Yeah. And I'll put it in the descriptions below too. Okay.
And one of the first things you'll see a couple things. Number one is that after more than 4 decades of work, I created something called my Incomplete Manifesto for Purpose. On one page, 10 points. This is what I've learned over 50 years doing this. And so people, if they say, well, can you just summarize it? And I said, yeah, it's on one page. It's called my Incomplete Manifesto. So that's on the website, but you can put it on your website. You should take a look at it. And every leader I coach, I say you have to have a manifesto. You don't have to do it like I do it, but you have to know what it is you stand for. This is what I stand for. And so that the second thing is that there's a whole list of all this book related excerpts and interviews and things if you're interested in, and you can dive in. Thanks for the privilege of your time. I always love talking with you, and I miss the fact that we didn't actually, when you were doing the AARP thing and we actually got to see each other in Washington, which was amazing.
Yes, I know. And I was, of course, all of us were bummed that we couldn't continue the project. It was a very useful, very relevant topic that AARPs was tackling. And I learned a lot from you in those years. So I'm grateful for that and to get to know you. And I was going to ask you, what's the best point for purposeful leaders? You already answered that at your last sentence too, but thank you so much. And I'm going to put little clips. There were so many great gems in everything you said, great quotes from there, which are meaningful, not because they just sound nice, but they're really real stuff that people can take on. And thanks for being an inspiration. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. And thanks for being such a great, purposeful leader. Thank you, Richard. Thanks for
the privilege of this conversation today. I was really looking forward to it, and it was great. So thank you.